Hi folks, so something I've been meaning to talk about for quite a long time actually is our good old friend the Kukri. Okay, Kukri can be spelt various different ways in old sources, but usually in modern English it's spelt K-U-K-R-I, and it is the so-called Gurkha knife, the knife of the Gurkhas but also of other people from Nepal, and indeed it was popular in India, particularly northern India as well. What really characterises the Kukri is, for its size, it's usually about a 1 foot 12-13 inch blade with a fairly short handle, but for its size it's quite heavy, it's quite forward balanced, and of course the edge is on the inside curve and it's curving forwards, which makes it a very effective chopping knife. It's sometimes described as a big knife, sometimes as a small sword actually in 19th century sources, and I might in a later video refer to some descriptive accounts of the Kukri in use, because luckily from the 19th century, because the Gurkhas were an important part of the British Army throughout most of the 19th century and of course into the 20th century and even today, there are many descriptive accounts, good descriptive accounts in English of the Gurkhas using Kukris. For example, in the siege of Delhi, there's an account of a Gurkha taking someone's face off literally from below with one of these. So the Gurkhas of Nepal characteristically carried these Kukris. The Kukris come in various different shapes and styles. This is a common style of one, a fairly average one, shall we say, and this is probably a military one, this particular one probably from World War I or maybe the 1920s or 30s, probably pre-World War II anyway. Some of them have these little fullers at the back. Nearly all Kukris have this little cutout, and there's many debates over what exactly this represents and what it's for, and the basic answer is no one really knows exactly what it's for or why it originated. And they're completely blunt on the back, but they're very thick. They're a very thick blade with lots of weight, very stiff, and of course very sharp all the way from there all the way to the tip. It's interesting as well that most of the earlier Kukris, not so much not all of the modern military ones, but most of the early Kukris have this ring, this kind of raised band around the middle of the grip, and in my opinion that is there really to just give a more secure grip, but also particularly to stop the hand from sliding up, because you don't have any kind of guard to stop the hand sliding up onto the blade, but with that ring being there, it tends to jam against that finger and prevent your hand from going up any higher. And in fact your hand is prevented from slipping off the end by the fact that you have this flared sort of pommel at the bottom. I should also mention fleetingly that I've collected Kukris and had Kukris for quite a number of years, and I'm very fond of them. I think they're fantastic knives, and I've cut quite a lot with them, and they're really good cutters. A good sharp Kukri, for example this one here that I'm holding, which I've cut quite a bit with, can cut as well as a sabre or a one-handed sword. So they can cut as effectively as a sword which is much longer. But the thing to remember, of course, is that to hit your target you have to be very close. It's almost punching distance, as you can see. It's only a few inches. You normally hit about there to there, and then the rest of the blade slides through. So actually you need to be very close to your target to be able to hit it. So a one-handed sword has the advantage in a fight, but so long as you can get close enough to the opponent, this can cut as powerfully as a one-handed sword, partly because of its weight, partly because of its shape. So just a few things about the constructions of the Kukris. So I'll move to an earlier example now. So here we've got a 19th century example, probably from, it's a bit guesswork with Kukris because the design stayed quite similar for quite a long time, but this one's probably from 1870, 1880, 1890, something like that, probably pre-1900, but later part of the 19th century. And the earlier ones are basically pretty much always secured into the handle by being rammed in there and glued, I believe, as well. So if the handles ever come off, you'll find that the tang inside is relatively short and sort of wedge shaped. So you'll see that on the pommel of this sort, and this has taken some damage over its 150 years life or however old it is, you'll see it's completely smooth wood there because the tang does not come all the way through. Okay, and this is the earlier style of making kukris. I should also mention the earlier ones often have quite a T cross section to the blade, so this one's very, very thick at the back, but it actually steps in, so it's like a T section, which is quite similar to Afghan Khyber knives. And it's possible that there was a bit of cross-pollination earlier on, maybe in the 16th, 17th century, between Khyber knives and kukris, in fact. You know, different kukris sometimes have single or double or even triple fullers in this part of the blade, as well as having line fullers in this part of the blade. So the earlier type, the handle is essentially plugged on and glued, and then the later type actually it runs all the way through to the end and is peened at the end, much like a normal sword would be, so that it's what we call a full tang, and it goes through all the way just with a thin extension and then hammered at the end with a metal cap like a pommel to secure it. And this is possibly a European influence that led to this. Once the Gurkhas came into sort of contact with Europeans, or perhaps when they joined the British Army. And another thing to mention as well is that early kukris, and this is an early example, are sometimes much slimmer, and also the entire shape of the kukri is more like a banana, I liken it to, or a boomerang. They tend to be curved all the way through the handle and the blade, as opposed to the later, more angular type. Okay, so that's probably an early one, and also this is significantly narrower and lighter, which is a certain kind of kukri. I won't say they were all like that earlier, because you do get earlier ones that are big and fat, but this type seemed to be fairly common around 1800, perhaps the 18th century as well, and this is much lighter and smaller weapon really. But similar to this, they did have big ones, and this, as you'll see, is not just a big kukri, it's a long kukri, and actually this is lighter than the fat examples I was showing before. It's just more of a sword length. So you do get these long sort of machete length ones that are popular in certain parts of Nepal amongst certain areas. And so there we go, you can buy modern made kukris made traditionally from companies like Himalayan Imports, but there are a lot of kukris, antique kukris out there to buy, and they're very reasonably priced really, considering their age and their quality. So I do encourage you, if you're interested, to go out and look for old kukris. One piece of advice: do not in general buy any kukri which has a lion on the pommel, a cast lion's face on the pommel. These are usually Indian-made tourist junk, essentially. There are a few which were made in the early 20th century mostly that are good quality with the lion pommel, but in general most of them are crap. So try and buy kukris that either have a fairly basic wooden handle like that, or at least don't have the lion and maybe have rivets through the side. If they have rivets through the side, it's probably one of the military kukris from World War I or World War II, or perhaps later. But steer clear of the lion on the pommel. Okay, thank you.